Good evening and welcome. I am Gaetano Masciullo, philosopher and historian, freelance journalist, and contributor for Aroca Press. And it is my privilege to host today's conversation. Let me introduce our guest today, a distinguished author, Mr. Mark Fellows, whose newest work, Hero in the Storm, Pius IX Against the Revolution, offers a vivid and compelling portrait of one of the most decisive pontificates in the history of the Church. Mr. Fellows, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
This is the cover of this new book. Mark Fellows has a vocational background in law, psychology, and social work. Converting to Catholicism in 1993 changed the focus and trajectory of his life. While working professionally and raising a family of 7 children, Mark was fortunate enough to find publishers for his articles and books on the Catholic faith and related subjects. Mark has been published in the Catholic and secular press for decades. His books include The Ninth Pius, A Second Coming, Fatima in Twilight, a biography of Fatima visionary Lucia dos Santos, a profile on J.R.R. Tolkien, and other books which can be found at markfellowsauthor.com. We can even show the website markfellowsauthor.com. Okay, so you can visit his website. Good.
Thanks for the plug.
Sorry. Once again, please.
Oh, I said thanks for promoting my website. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. So, my first question. Your opening chapter, The Landscape, frames the 19th century as an age of intense hostility toward the Church. How essential is it for modern readers to understand this atmosphere before approaching the life of Pius IX?
That's a good question. The answer is, I think we are all products of our time. So 50 years from now, people are going to look at us, Gaetano, and think, why did they do that? Or why were they thinking this? And the fact is, that's the way things were when we were making those decisions and saying those things. Looking back at the landscape for the 19th century and actually the end of the 18th century with the French Revolution, Catholics were being killed, just innocent Catholics being murdered. Kings and queens were being executed. Those were the kinds of things that were going on. It was a very violent time. And, you know, obviously when things like that are happening, there's a lot of hatred occurring against the church. And so I think that it's very helpful for people to understand the life of Pius IX or anybody from that time period, to understand the context and the environment that he grew up in and was Pope in.
Yeah. So in the chapter titled The Church and the Revolution, you portray a world reshaped by secret societies, political upheavals, and ideological warfare. How did these forces converge to shape Giovanni Maria Mastai-Ferretti, the lay name of the Pope, before he ever became Pope?
He was born in 1792, which was 3 years after the French Revolution. So he grew up in a time where actually Napoleon had invaded the Papal States, which is where Pius IX was born and was raised. So he was raised in an atmosphere where the French army was occupying his hometown, his homeland. So obviously that's a huge shaping factor in the life of any boy or young man. It was just a crazy time, Gaetano, in 1798. In addition to invading Italy, Napoleon kidnapped Pius VI and took him out of Rome and sent him on a brutal carriage ride over the Swiss Alps in bitter winter. He wanted to bring the Pope back to France so he could control the Pope and control the church. But Pius VI was old, and the ride just about killed him, and he ended up dying before they ever made it back to France. So that was the shape of the church back then. Just as an aside, it was just awful the way they treated this Pope, because they not only killed him with a brutal ride through the Swiss Alps in winter, but when he died, they just basically threw his body in an unmarked grave without a service or anything. You wouldn't have thought he was Pope or anything. So that's the kind of time that Giovanni Mastai-Ferretti grew up in, and obviously that's going to shape you. Now, just one more thing that I'm sure shaped him was the next Pope, which was Pope Pius VII. He was also kidnapped by Napoleon, but he survived, excommunicated Napoleon. And after he excommunicated Napoleon, well, he was also kidnapped, like Pius VI. He excommunicated Napoleon. Napoleon laughed, but then he lost power and he was exiled in Elba. So the excommunication seems to have worked against Napoleon pretty drastically. When Pius VII returned to Rome, he stopped by the hometown of Giovanni Mastai-Ferretti. It turns out that the two were distant cousins, not closely related, but they were related by blood. And so Pius VII stopped to visit his relatives, and he ended up taking Giovanni Mastai-Ferretti with him to Rome. So I'm sure that long carriage ride from the Adriatic Sea to Rome was very informative for both people. And I think that Pius VII probably found out that Giovanni Mastai-Ferretti was trying to become a priest, but that his epilepsy was almost making it impossible for him to become a priest like he wanted to.
So, chapter 3 of this book raises a very provocative question. A Freemason, because as we know, Pope Pius IX, there is this liberal myth around this figure, right? And
Yes.
why do accusations about Mastai-Ferretti's alleged Masonic connections persist? And how does your research dispel or contextualize these claims?
I have no idea why people think he was a Freemason, because he was so against Freemasonry. He wrote almost a dozen encyclicals against Freemasonry. So it is difficult for me to really understand why he was thought to be a Freemason. There's no evidence, physical evidence. There's no eyewitnesses. There's no documentation supporting that claim. So, it's the only thing I can think is that at the time he was Pope, the Austrian army was occupying parts of Italy, and that was very annoying to Italians because they just wanted to rule themselves. They didn't really want Austria telling them what to do, and so any patriotic Italian was against Austria being in Italy. The fact was, Austria was asked to enter Italy by Pope Gregory when the Freemasons started disrupting the Papal States, and it was difficult to control the situation. And so Pope Gregory asked for Austria to become involved just to calm things down so that his people would be safe from revolution and from the violence that was going on in the area. So what Freemasonry did was they used the patriotic part of it to recruit people. And so, you know, Pope Pius IX was patriotic. Well, this was before he was Pope, obviously. He was a Bishop of Spoleto. And, you know, he...
This is why he chose the non-Pius, right? In honor of the predecessor, Pius VII, if I remember well. Maybe he was a bishop in Spoleto.
That boy, you have a good memory. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, and so he was appointed there by Pope Gregory, and so getting back to the Freemasonry. There was an incident in Spoleto that Pius or Archbishop Mastai-Ferretti let some Freemasons escape through his town that the Austrian army was pursuing. And he did that to protect his town from war and battles between the Freemasons who were hiding in his town and the Austrian army, which wanted to come in, occupy the town, and get the Freemasons. So Mastai-Ferretti made a deal with the Freemasons. You stack up your guns, I'll give you some money, just get out of here and leave my people alone. So they did. Austria found out what he did. They got very angry. They talked to Pope Gregory. You know, this guy's interfering with what we're trying to do here. Pope Gregory got mad at Mastai-Ferretti too. So he was kind of in a no-win situation with that. But after that, he did get kind of a reputation as at least being a liberal, if not an actual Freemason. But he was never anything of the sort. And if I could just end my answer to the question by quoting something from the book, it's a quotation from Henry Daniel Rups, a French church historian, who talks about, you know, was Mastai-Ferretti really a Freemason? I mean, just what was going on with him. And he says that his, Mastai-Ferretti's, so-called liberalism was nothing more than, excuse me, a true liberality of soul and the clear conviction that methods employed hitherto against the revolution were wrong. He believed that the best way for a ruler to halt the advance of revolution was not to have recourse to arms, but to set himself to win men's hearts by gentleness, generosity, and confidence. So that is the basis of Mastai-Ferretti's personality. He was a very kind, gentle, charitable man. And the Freemasons and a lot of other people tried to take advantage of that, thinking that he would be weak and that he would be easily manipulated. But they found out differently. So to finish this question, he was never a Freemason. He really wasn't even a liberal. He was just very kind and very charitable, even to his enemies.
Yeah. So in the chapters to the papacy and the Risorgimento, you recount Pius IX early popularity and his initial reforms. And these reforms helped Carbonari and other Italian secret societies to build this myth of liberal pope, right? So how did the hopes placed in him by revolutionaries differ from the mission he believed was entrusted to him by the providence?
That is a good question. First of all, one of his initial reforms in the question you asked, was to grant amnesty to many of the Carbonari, which was the name for Italian Freemasons, granting them amnesty. They were in jail in the Papal States, and Pius IX set them free. And he did that in order to win the trust and of the leaders of Young Italy, which was Young Italy was the name of Italian Freemasonry. And so he wanted to extend, some charity towards them, thinking that it would be returned. It was not returned. The people, the revolutionaries granted amnesty, came to Rome and started plotting against Pius IX. He was, I guess, naive is the word, and thinking that if he used Christian charity, that people would eventually respond in kind. But he found out quickly that that was, in fact, not the case. They started calling him the Patriot Pope. The Freemasons called him that because they were trying to present an image of him that he was on their side, that he wanted what the Freemasons wanted, which was Austria out of Italy, to start with anyway. And the Freemasons wanted Austria out of Italy so that they could go in and resume their bloodshed and their revolutionary activities with no consequence. So that's why the Freemasons wanted Austria out of Italy. They wanted Pius IX to declare war on Austria, and that's why they called him the Patriot Pope. They were trying to, butter him up and make everyone think that he was on their side. And, as I mentioned before, Pius IX did not like Austria in Italy. He was patriotic like any other Italian, but he wasn't going to declare war on them, and he wasn't going to force them out, without diplomacy or diplomatic, process going on. So what the Freemasons wanted to do was unite all of Italy under a single secular government that was going to be run by them. That was how they were. The Great Unification is what they called it. Pius IX thought that unity only came from the church. It did not come from a secular government. It did not come from Freemasonry. Most definitely did not come from Freemasonry. It came from the church. And that was the basis of their difference. In 1848, there were revolutions throughout Europe that caused many monarchs to flee. And that was part of the installment of secular governments. And Pius IX ended up being one of those monarchs to flee because he had to flee Rome when the Freemasons took it over and made him their prisoner.
Yes. Your middle chapters, especially Enter the Immaculate and Pronouncing the Immaculate Conception, interweave Marian theology with a kind of political catastrophe. How does Mary's role illuminate Pius IX courage and the spiritual clarity amid turmoil?
He is repeatedly quoted as saying that he relies on Mary for his courage, for his wisdom, and for to pretty much help him handle some of the very difficult situations that he was faced with in his 32 years as Pope. This man put up with a heck of a lot for 32 years, and they never gave him a break. But he relied on the Blessed Virgin Mary for much of his strength, for counsel. He actually relied on her to become a priest in the first place, because when he was younger, he suffered from epilepsy, as I think I mentioned before. And there was some real doubts as to whether he would be able to be priest. Back in the 1800s, they didn't really have a cure for epilepsy. And, sometimes it was a fatal disease. if the seizures were bad enough. And he was having seizures, and obviously you can't say mass if you're having a seizure. That would be a very, very difficult situation. So he prayed to Mary. He went to the Holy House in Loretto and asked her to cure his epilepsy. And after that, according to the story, he never had another seizure. He went back to Pope Pius VII and said, look, this is the situation. I believe that I'm healed of this. I haven't had a seizure in quite a while now. I would like you to allow me to become a priest again, like I was planning. And Pius VII believed him. He said, I believe that she has healed you. You just go ahead and become a priest. So Pius IX relied on Mary very early in his career in the church. And that just continued and actually intensified, I think, as when he became Pope, because obviously he needed Mary even more than he did before. It's interesting, in 1854, Pius IX declared the dogma of the Immaculate Conception of the Blessed Virgin Mary to be an infallible dogma of the church, which means that this is the truth. This is the way things were and are. Interesting, 4 years later, Bernadette in Lourdes was visited many times by the Blessed Virgin Mary. Bernadette often asked Mary what her name was. And one time, after being asked many times, Mary looked at Bernadette and quietly said, I am the Immaculate Conception. That's proof from heaven, from the Blessed Virgin Mary, that what Pope Pius IX declared infallible 4 years earlier was in fact the case.
Late chapters such as The Syllabus of Errors, the Vatican Council, and the Fall of Rome depict a pope standing firm as the storm intensifies. What do you believe modern Catholics must understand about Pius IX doctrinal firmness at a time when
everything around him was collapsing, I think, is the end of the question. And to presume to answer it, I think that what modern Catholics must understand is that we too can be like Pope Pius IX. We too can stand firm and loyal to the faith of all time. We don't have to be swayed or overly influenced by things contrary to the faith, no matter what the source is for those erroneous beliefs. I think it's also important to be charitable to our enemies as well as our friends, like Pius IX was. Even though people were betraying him and taking his territory, he would excommunicate them, but then he would unexcommunicate them when they were about to die and give them last rites and try to get them to heaven. So, he had remarkable charity. He had a remarkable spirit of love and compassion. I think it's also important for modern Catholics to keep a sense of humor. Pius IX had a remarkable sense of humor, even when in the darkest times. He was able to make a joke. He was able to keep things in perspective. He just had a remarkable pontificate. And lastly, I think what modern Catholics should take away from this story is to never forget Mary, because she will always help you if you ask.
Mr. Fellows, thank you for offering such depth, clarity, and passion. Your book helps us see not only a pope, but a shepherd who remained steadfast in faith while the world around him was shaken. And to our listeners, you can purchase Hero in the Storm, Pius IX Against the Revolution, directly from Aroca Press, www.arocapress.com. I warmly encourage you to do so. It is a work that enlightens the mind and strengthens the heart. Thank you, Mr. Fellows, for joining us.
Very nice to meet you, Gaetano. Thank you very much for the interview.